The massive ships appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system like dark clouds blocking out the stars. Each vessel was the size of a small city. Black metal gleaming under the distant sun, they moved in perfect formation, hundreds of them. Their hulls marked with symbols that meant nothing to human eyes. Ambassador Zektar stood on the bridge of the lead ship, his 6 arms folded behind his back as he watched the small blue planet grow larger on the screen. His skin was pale green, almost transparent, and his large black eyes reflected the light from the displays around him. He had done this same job for over 200 years. Every time was exactly the same. "Send the message," he told his communication officer. The officer, a creature that looked like a walking tree with too many branches, nodded and pressed several buttons on his control panel. Across all of Earth's radio waves, television signals, and computer networks, the same message began to play. It spoke in every human language at once, the words clear and simple. "People of Earth, we are the Galactic Council. We have come to offer you a place in our great community of worlds. You will give us 30% of your planet's resources each year. You will accept our guidance in all matters of government and law. You will follow our rules for peace and order. In return, you will be protected and cared for. You have 1 day to accept this generous offer. If you refuse, we will be forced to bring peace to your world ourselves." Zektar smiled, showing rows of small, sharp teeth. The message was perfect. It had worked on every world for 3,000 years. Not once had any species chosen the second option. They always said yes in the end. On Earth, the message reached every government office, every military base, every home with a television or radio. People stopped what they were doing and listened. Some screamed, some cried, most just stood there, trying to understand what they had just heard. In New York City, the United Nations building buzzed with activity. Representatives from every country on Earth gathered in emergency session. Secretary General Chen Morrison, a calm woman in her 60s, sat at the head of the long table and listened to the chaos around her. "We have to negotiate," said the representative from France. "Surely we can find a middle ground." "Negotiate with what?" asked the man from Russia. "They have hundreds of ships. We have nothing that could fight them." "Maybe they're lying," suggested the woman from Brazil. "Maybe they're not as strong as they pretend." Chen Morrison raised her hand, and the room fell quiet. She had been a diplomat for 40 years. She had seen wars and peace treaties, victories and defeats. She knew when someone was bluffing, and she knew when they were not. "They're not lying," she said quietly. "Those ships are real. Their weapons are real. They could destroy us all without trying very hard." "Then we have to surrender," said the man from Germany. "We have no choice." Morrison looked around the room at all the faces staring back at her. She saw fear in their eyes, but she also saw something else. Something that made her proud to be human. "There is always a choice," she said. Up in space, Zektar waited. He had seen the activity on the planet below. The lights of their cities, the movement of their primitive aircraft. It was always the same. First came panic, then arguments, then long discussions about what to do. After that came the careful questions about terms and conditions. Finally came acceptance. He had plenty of time. The humans would need at least 12 hours to organize their response. Most species took the full day. Some even asked for extensions, which the council sometimes granted if they were polite about it. His communication officer looked up from his station. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the planet." Zektar checked the time display. It had been less than 1 hour since they sent their message. This was unusually fast, but not unheard of. Sometimes the more intelligent species recognized the obvious truth quickly. "Put it through," he said. The screen in front of him lit up with the image of a human female. She sat behind a simple wooden desk in what looked like a primitive meeting chamber. Her hair was gray, her face lined with age, but her eyes were steady and clear. "This is Secretary General Chen Morrison, speaking for all the nations and peoples of Earth," she said. Her voice was calm, like someone ordering coffee or discussing the weather. "We have received your message and considered your offer carefully." Zektar nodded. "Good. They were being sensible about this. Our response is as follows, Morrison continued, looking directly into the camera. No. The word hung in the air like a physical thing. Zektar blinked, his large black eyes, and leaned forward. I'm sorry, he said to his communication officer. Did the translation system malfunction? What did she say? The officer, who had been doing this job for 50 years, checked his equipment 3 times. She said, No, sir. The translation is correct. No? Zektar repeated the word like it was something foreign and strange. No, to what part of the offer? The resource percentage? The oversight terms? Just, no, sir. No to everything. On the screen, Morrison was still sitting calmly behind her desk. She had not ended the transmission. She simply waited, as if she had said everything that needed to be said. This must be some sort of mistake. Zektar muttered. Perhaps they don't understand the consequences of refusal. He activated the communication system and spoke directly to the human leader. Secretary General Morrison, I believe there may have been a misunderstanding. Are you refusing our generous offer to join the galactic community? Yes, Morrison replied without hesitation. We refuse. Do you understand that refusal means we will be forced to pacify your world? We understand. Do you understand that pacification means the complete destruction of your civilization? We understand that too. Zektar stared at the screen in complete confusion. In 3,000 years of galactic expansion, no species had ever chosen destruction over submission. It was impossible. It made no sense. Every intelligent being valued survival above all else. Then why? He asked, genuinely puzzled. Morrison smiled. And for a moment her face looked almost sad. Because some things are more important than survival. Ambassador. Freedom is one of them. The transmission ended, leaving Zektar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his crew stood in silence, unsure of what had just happened. In 3 millennia of galactic conquest, they had just heard something that had never been spoken before. A simple word that would change everything. No. War Master Velnox had commanded tribute fleets for over 300 years. He had seen every type of surrender in the galaxy. The proud warrior races who made speeches about honor before bending the knee. The merchant species who tried to negotiate better terms. The ancient civilizations who quoted philosophy while accepting their fate. But he had never seen anything like this. Run the translation matrix again, he told his chief technical officer. The officer, a creature that looked like a giant spider made of silver metal, clicked its mandibles nervously. Sir, I've run it 17 times. The translation is correct. The human word translates exactly to our concept of complete refusal. Velnox stared at the communication logs displayed on his screen. Every other species in galactic history had at least tried to negotiate. The Zephyrians had a beautiful 6-week ceremony where they sang ancient songs while formally accepting council rule. The Korgan wrote epic poems about the honor of serving a greater cause. The machine intelligences called the Nexus had submitted a 10,000-page report proving mathematically that joining the council was the most logical choice. But the humans had simply said no and ended the conversation. Perhaps their translation systems are primitive, suggested his tactical advisor. Maybe they don't understand what we're offering. Or what we're threatening, added another officer. Velnox shook his massive head. He was built like a mountain with arms, his rocky skin gray and ancient. His species, the Thurok, had been among the first to join the council willingly. They understood the value of peace and order. Send the message again, he ordered. Make it simpler. Use smaller words. Send the message again. Offer the message again. Send the message again. 20 minutes later, Earth received another transmission. This time, the message was written like instructions for children. We are strong. You are weak. Join us, or we will hurt you. Choose now. The response came back in less than 5 minutes. Secretary General Morrison appeared on screen again, looking exactly as calm as before. We understand your message perfectly, she said. Our answer remains the same. No. Across the galaxy, Emergency meetings began on every council world. The high chamber on the capital planet of Zentari Prime, filled with representatives from 400 species. They had been called together for something that had never happened before. A species choosing extinction over submission. High Counselor Yithvar, an ancient being whose body was mostly translucent energy contained in a mechanical shell, called for order. "We face an unprecedented situation," his voice echoed through the chamber. "A species has refused our standard offer." A murmur ran through the assembly. Some counselors leaned forward with interest. Others looked confused. A few seemed afraid, though none would admit it. "Perhaps they misunderstood," suggested Counselor Kren from the Aquatic Collective. His voice bubbled through the water-filled speaking chamber he required. "Their primitive brains may not process complex concepts like galactic governance." "Or perhaps," said Counselor Prime Velthek of the Hive Mind Union, her hundreds of smaller bodies speaking in perfect unison, "they simply need more time to discuss among themselves. Some species take longer to reach consensus." High Counselor Yithvar activated the central display, showing images of Earth and its people. "Our analysis teams have been studying this species called humanity for the past day. Their behavior patterns are unusual." The images showed humans throughout their history. Armies marching into hopeless battles. Individuals standing alone against overwhelming forces. Groups of people fighting for ideas that couldn't be touched or measured. Dr. Kithani, the Council's leading expert on alien psychology, stepped forward to address the assembly. She was tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin that changed colors based on her emotions. Right now, her skin was a deep purple that meant concern. "Members of the Council," she began, "I have reviewed all available data on human behavior and psychology. What I have found is deeply troubling. This species appears to have a fundamentally different relationship with concepts like survival, submission, and rational choice." She activated a series of displays showing human historical records. "Look at these examples. Throughout their recorded history, humans have repeatedly chosen death over surrender. They have concepts in their languages like better dead than slave and give me liberty or give me death. They celebrate individuals who fought impossible odds, regardless of whether they won or lost." Counselor Kren bubbled nervously. "Surely that's just primitive behavior. All species go through violent phases before they achieve civilization." "That's what we thought," Dr. Kithani replied, her skin shifting to an even darker purple. "But humans achieved interplanetary travel while still fighting wars among themselves. They reached their current level of technology without ever achieving global peace. They seem to view conflict as natural, even necessary." "That's impossible," declared Counselor Prime Velthek. "No rational species can function without accepting hierarchy and order." "Exactly, Doctor," Kithani said, and her skin turned almost black. "Which brings us to my primary conclusion. This species may not be rational by our standards. They appear to possess a psychological framework that makes surrender incomprehensible to them. They would literally rather die than submit to authority they haven't chosen for themselves." The chamber fell silent. For 3,000 years, the Council had based their expansion on a simple truth. Every intelligent being valued survival above all else. Faced with overwhelming force, rational beings would choose life under Council rule over death in hopeless resistance. But humans seem to operate by completely different rules. "What do you recommend?" High Counselor Yithvar asked. Before Dr. Kithani could answer, a communication alert echoed through the chamber. The High Counselor activated the receiver, and Ambassador Zektar's image appeared. "High Council," he said, his voice tense. "The humans have sent us another message. Have they reconsidered their position?" "No, sir. They sent us the same word again. Just no. But this time they included additional information. They said they want to make sure we understand them clearly." The screen changed to show Secretary General Morrison once more. She sat in the same simple chair, looking directly into the camera. "We want to be absolutely clear about our position," she said. "We reject your offer completely. We will not pay tribute. We will not accept your oversight. We will not follow your laws. If you attempt to force us, we will resist with everything we have. We would rather see our world burn than live as your subjects. The transmission ended, leaving the High Council chamber in complete silence. Finally, Councillor Kren spoke, his voice small and bubbling. They're going to make us actually do it, aren't they? High Councillor Yithvar's energy form flickered with what might have been uncertainty. In 3,000 years of galactic expansion, the Council had never faced pacification. The threat had always been enough. Send analysis ships, he ordered finally. Full cultural study teams. I want to understand exactly what we're dealing with before we make any decisions. As the council session ended and representatives returned to their home worlds, a strange thing began happening. The word the humans had used, that simple, no, began spreading through council space. Junior species heard about it from their overseers. Ship crews whispered it in their quarters. For the first time in 3 millennia, beings across the galaxy learned that refusal was possible, and some of them started to wonder what might happen if they tried it themselves. The impossible word had been spoken, and nothing would ever be the same. 3 council research ships entered Earth's solar system 1 week after the first contact. They were smaller than the tribute fleet, designed for observation rather than intimidation. Their hulls were covered with sensors and communication arrays that could intercept and analyze any form of information. Dr. Kithani commanded the lead research vessel from her laboratory deep inside the ship. Around her, dozens of analysts from different species worked at their stations, studying everything they could learn about humanity. What they discovered made no sense according to everything they knew about intelligent life. "This cannot be correct," muttered Professor Yex, a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish filled with sparkling lights. He had been studying galactic civilizations for 800 years. "Show me the historical data again." His assistant, a young Thurok named Grok, activated the holographic display. Images of human history appeared in the air between them. Armies clashing with swords and spears. Ships firing cannons at each other across oceans. Aircraft dropping bombs on cities. Soldiers fighting in trenches filled with mud and death. Every year for the past 5,000 years, Grok explained in his deep, rocky voice. War, conflict, fighting. They have never known galactic peace because they have never known any peace at all. Professor Yex floated closer to the display, his lights blinking rapidly. But this makes no evolutionary sense. Constant warfare should have destroyed them or made them extinct. How did they develop technology? How did they build cities? How did they achieve space travel? They did it all while fighting each other, Dr. Kithani said, joining the conversation. Her skin was a worried shade of purple that had been getting darker each day. Look at this data. They reached their current technological level not despite their conflicts, but because of them. War drove their innovation. Competition pushed their development. They turned the need to fight each other into the ability to reach the stars. Another analyst, a tree-like being from the forest worlds, rustled his leaves nervously. Doctor, we finished analyzing their entertainment media. The results are disturbing. Dr. Kithani turned to look at him. Show me. The holographic display changed to show scenes from human movies, books, and games. Heroes standing alone against impossible odds. Small groups of rebels fighting vast empires, individuals sacrificing themselves to protect others. Stories where the good guys lost battles but won moral victories. Tales where death was chosen over surrender, time and again. They celebrate failure, the tree being said, his voice shaking with confusion. They have stories about people who fought hopeless battles and lost. And they call these people heroes. They teach their children that some things are more important than living. What things? Professor Yex asked, his lights dimming. Dr. Kithani activated another section of data. Freedom. Individual choice. The right to make their own decisions. They have concepts that don't translate well into our languages because no other species has ever developed them. She highlighted several human quotes that had been translated into galactic standard. Give me liberty or give me death. Better to die standing than live kneeling. Freedom is not free. The only good surrender is a temporary one. This is madness, Grok muttered, his rocky features creasing with confusion. How can a choice be more important than life itself? Life is the foundation of everything else. Without life, there is nothing. That's exactly what we thought, Doctor, Kithani replied. But humans seem to believe that life without choice is not really life at all. They would rather not exist than exist under someone else's control. The research continued for 2 more weeks. The Council ships intercepted human communications, studied their social structures, analyzed their decision-making processes. Every piece of data they gathered made the situation seem more impossible. Humans, they learned, had never developed a proper system of submission to authority. Even their governments were based on the idea that people could choose their leaders and change them if they didn't like their decisions. Their entire social structure was built around the concept of individual freedom. Worse still, humans seemed to view resistance as a virtue. They had stories about people who fought against unfair laws, who refused to obey unjust orders, who stood up to bullies even when they knew they would lose. These resistors were not seen as troublemakers or criminals. They were seen as heroes. During the 3rd week, the Council sent another message to Earth. This time they tried a different approach. Instead of demanding submission, they offered negotiations. They suggested that perhaps some arrangement could be worked out that would benefit both sides. The response came back faster than before. Secretary General Morrison appeared on screen again, but this time she was not alone. Behind her stood representatives from every major nation on Earth. They all looked calm and determined. "Members of the Galactic Council," Morrison said, "we appreciate your willingness to negotiate. However, our position remains unchanged. We will not accept any form of outside control over our world or our people. We are willing to discuss trade agreements, cultural exchanges, or mutual defense treaties between equals, but we will not submit to your authority in any way. Our answer to any form of submission is still the same: no." The transmission ended, and Dr. Kithani realized that the situation had become even worse. The humans were not just refusing to surrender. They were offering to treat the Council as equals, as if a primitive single-planet species could possibly be equal to a civilization that controlled 400 worlds. But the most disturbing part was what happened next. Within days of the human response, strange reports began coming in from across Council space. On 12 different worlds, tributary species had submitted formal questions to their Council overseers. They wanted to know what would happen if they, hypothetically, decided to reduce their tribute payments. They asked about the possibility of renegotiating their submission treaties. They inquired about the legal procedures for leaving Council protection. On the mining world of Kepler 7th, a group of young Korgan had been heard singing traditional warrior songs that hadn't been performed in 2 centuries. On the water world of Aquatica Prime, some citizens had started asking why their planet needed Council protection from threats that never seemed to actually exist. Most concerning of all, surveillance reports indicated that the word "no" had begun appearing in graffiti, in private messages, and in quiet conversations across 17 different worlds. The simple human response was spreading like a disease through Council space. Dr. Kithani compiled her final report on humanity with growing dread. Her skin had turned almost black with worry by the time she finished. The report was only 3 pages long, but it contained the most terrifying conclusion she had ever reached in her long career. Recommendation: immediate quarantine of the human system. Under no circumstances should any Council citizen be allowed contact with this species. Their psychological framework represents a fundamental threat to galactic stability. The concepts they carry are infectious and could lead to the collapse of our entire civilization if allowed to spread. She paused before adding the final line: if pacification becomes necessary, it must be swift and complete. We cannot allow this word they speak to spread any further. But even as she sent the report, Dr. Kithani knew it was already too late. The impossible word had been spoken, and it was spreading through the galaxy like wildfire. No, the word that could end everything the Council had built. The High Council chamber had never seen anything like this emergency session. Representatives from 400 worlds gathered in the Great Hall, but for the first time in 3,000 years, they were not discussing expansion or tribute collection. They were discussing war. High Counselor Yithvar's energy form flickered with stress as he read Dr. Kithani's final report aloud. The human psychological framework represents a fundamental threat to galactic stability. Pacification may be the only option to prevent total system collapse. Counselor Kren from the Aquatic Collective bubbled nervously in his water tank. Surely we don't need to actually resort to that. No one has ever forced us to use pacification before. That's because no one has ever been stupid enough to refuse us before, rumbled Counselor Thok of the Stone Worlds, his massive rocky frame shifting with anger. These humans need to learn their place. But High Counselor Yithvar could see the fear behind the anger. The Council had built their entire civilization on a simple truth. Overwhelming force meant automatic surrender. They had never actually had to use that force. The threat had always been enough. Now, for the first time in their history, they might have to discover if their weapons were as effective as they claimed. Very well, Yithvar announced. Authorization is granted for pacification of the human system. War Master Velnox will begin operations immediately. The word spread through Council space faster than their fastest ships. Pacification, the thing that had never happened, was about to happen. Some citizens felt relief that the human problem would finally be solved. Others felt a strange uneasiness they couldn't explain. But on 17 different worlds, something unprecedented occurred. 3 tributary species declared immediate independence from the Council. The Korgan of Kepler VII announced they would no longer pay tribute or follow Council laws. The water dwellers of Aquatica Prime expelled all Council representatives from their world. The peaceful plant people of the Garden Worlds formally requested termination of their protection treaties. Each declaration ended with the same word that had started it all: no. War Master Velnox received the news as his massive fleet approached Earth's solar system. 200 of the largest warships in the galaxy, carrying enough firepower to turn a planet into dust. But instead of feeling confident about the coming battle, he felt something he had never experienced before: uncertainty. The reports from other sectors were troubling. Rebellions had broken out on worlds that had been peaceful for centuries. Council forces were being stretched thin trying to maintain order across their territory. And all because of one word spoken by one primitive species. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth." Velnox almost didn't want to see it. Every message from the humans had brought more problems, but he activated the screen anyway. Secretary General Morrison appeared again. But this time she was not sitting behind a desk. She stood on what looked like a military base, with human soldiers visible in the background. Her expression was grim but determined. "War Master Velnox," she said, somehow knowing exactly who would be watching. "We know you're coming. We know what you plan to do. We want you to understand something before you begin." She gestured to the soldiers behind her. "These people are volunteers. Every single human you will face chose to be here. We could have evacuated our civilians, hidden our children, tried to preserve some part of our species for the future. Instead, we chose to fight." The camera pulled back to show the massive scope of the human preparations. Military installations covered the planet's surface. Ships filled the space around Earth, small and primitive compared to Council vessels but numerous beyond counting. "We know we cannot win," Morrison continued. "We know our technology is inferior and our numbers too few. But we also know something you don't understand. Sometimes winning isn't the point. Sometimes fighting is more important than surviving." The transmission ended, and Velnox stared at the blank screen in growing dread. He had commanded tribute fleets for centuries, but he had never actually fought a war. None of them had. The Council military was designed to intimidate, not to battle. When the fighting began, Velnox learned the true horror of what humans called warfare. Council doctrine was simple: deploy overwhelming force, demand surrender, accept submission. Their weapons were designed to disable rather than destroy. Their tactics focused on minimizing casualties and demonstrating superior power. But humans fought like nothing the Council had ever imagined. They didn't try to minimize casualties. They tried to maximize them. On both sides. Their ships rammed Council vessels in suicide attacks. Their soldiers fought to the death instead of retreating when defeated. They used tactics that made victory as costly as possible. "Sir," his tactical officer reported during the third day of battle, "we've lost 12 capital ships and over 50 support vessels. The humans have lost everything they had in orbit, but they keep sending more." "More what?" Velnox asked. "We destroyed their space fleet yesterday. Civilian ships, sir. Converted cargo haulers, mining vessels, even passenger transports. They've loaded them with explosives, and they're using them as weapons." Velnox watched in horror as another wave of human ships approached his fleet. These weren't military vessels. They were piloted by shopkeepers, teachers, farmers. Ordinary people who had chosen to die, fighting rather than live under council rule. "This is insane," he muttered. "Why don't they surrender?" His communication officer looked up from his station. "Sir, we're receiving reports from 17 different sectors. The rebellions are spreading. The Korgan have engaged council forces on Kepler the 7th. The Aquatica Prime Defense Fleet has attacked our garrison ships. We're getting requests for military support from 14 other worlds." The situation was spiraling beyond anything the council had ever faced. What was supposed to be a simple pacification had turned into a galaxy-wide crisis. Every day the fighting continued. More species declared independence. Every human ship that died taking council vessels with it became proof that the mighty Galactic Council could be challenged. On Earth's surface, the battle was even worse. Human ground forces used tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They hid among their own civilians, making every building a potential fortress. They booby-trapped their own cities, turning their homes into weapons. They fought from the rubble of their destroyed infrastructure, using the Council's own attacks against them. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to welcome death in battle. Council forces were trained to retreat when outnumbered, to surrender when defeat was certain, to preserve their lives for future service. But humans charged directly into overwhelming firepower, singing songs and shouting battle cries, treating death as victory if they could take even one council soldier with them. After 2 weeks of fighting, Velnox finally understood what Dr. Kithani had tried to warn them about. Humans didn't just refuse to surrender. They had turned refusal itself into a weapon. Every human who died fighting proved that the council could be resisted. Every ship that fell in a kamikaze attack demonstrated that superior technology wasn't enough. Every day the battle continued, sent the same message to every tributary species in the galaxy. The mighty council could bleed. As reports flooded in from across council space about rebellions and uprisings, Velnox realized the terrible truth. The humans had already won, not by defeating the council militarily, but by destroying something far more important: the illusion of council invincibility. The impossible word had become an impossible war, and that war was tearing apart 3,000 years of galactic peace. No had become a revolution, and revolution was spreading faster than the council could stop it. 2 years had passed since the first human ship rammed a council destroyer. 2 years of the most brutal fighting the galaxy had ever seen. The cost had been terrible for both sides. Millions of humans were dead, their cities in ruins, their blue world scarred with the marks of orbital bombardment. But the Council had paid a price too, one they never expected to pay. 57 Council ships destroyed, 32 worlds in open rebellion, the tribute system collapsing as species after species chose to fight rather than submit. The carefully maintained galactic order was falling apart. And it all started with one impossible word. Emergency Counselor Prime Zektul stood at the viewing port of his personal ship as it approached the devastated Earth. He was old, even by Council standards, his crystalline body glowing with the accumulated wisdom of 8 centuries. He had been chosen for this mission because he was the only Council leader willing to do something that had never been done before. He was going to negotiate with equals. The shuttle that carried him to Earth's surface was small and unarmed. It landed in what had once been New York City, now a maze of rubble and makeshift structures built from the wreckage of war. Human soldiers escorted him through the ruins to a simple building that served as their government center. Secretary General Chen Morrison waited for him in the same wooden-floored room where she had first spoken that impossible word. She looked older now. Her gray hair turned white, her face lined with the stress of leading her species through 2 years of hell. But her eyes were still steady and calm. "Emergency Counselor Prime Zektul," she said, standing to greet him. "Welcome to Earth." Zektul's crystalline form pulsed with soft light as he studied the human leader. Around the room, other humans sat quietly at a simple wooden table. No magnificent halls, no displays of power, no ceremonies designed to intimidate, just people sitting in chairs, ready to talk. "Secretary General Morrison," he replied, his voice echoing strangely through the translation device. "I have come to ask a question that my people have never needed to ask before." Morrison gestured for him to sit in a chair that had been specially designed for his crystalline physiology. "What question is that?" Zektul settled into the chair, his light dimming to a thoughtful glow. "Why? Your species could have lived in comfort and safety as part of our galactic community. Your people would have been protected, fed, cared for. Instead, you chose death and destruction over peace and prosperity. I have studied your species for 2 years, and I still cannot understand. Why did you choose this path?" Morrison was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the ruins of her city. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. "Because you never offered us peace, Emergency Counselor. You offered us slavery with comfortable chains. You offered us the safety of a cage and called it protection. You offered us food from your table and called it generosity." She turned back to look directly at him. "But you never offered us the one thing that makes life worth living." "What is that?" Zektul asked, genuinely puzzled. "Choice," Morrison replied. "The right to make our own decisions, even if those decisions are wrong. The right to fail on our own terms, rather than succeed on yours. The right to be free, even if freedom is dangerous and difficult, and sometimes painful." Zektul's light flickered with confusion. "But freedom without security is chaos. Freedom without guidance leads to conflict and suffering. Look at your own history. Endless wars, constant strife. How can you prefer that to the peace we offered?" Morrison smiled. And for a moment she looked almost sad. "Because those wars were our wars. That strife was our choice. When we failed as free beings. When we succeeded, the victory was truly ours." She leaned forward in her chair. "Humanity chooses to die free rather than live as property. That's not madness, Emergency Counselor. That's what makes us human." The room fell silent. Through the window, Zektul could see human children playing in the rubble outside, laughing despite everything they had lost. They were building something new from the wreckage, something that belonged to them. "What do you want from us?" he asked finally. "Nothing," Morrison replied. "We want nothing from you except the right to exist as ourselves. We're willing to trade with you, to share knowledge and culture, to work together when our interests align, but we will never again accept outside control over our world or our people." Zektul considered her words carefully. Everything his people had believed about civilization, about order, about the necessity of submission to superior authority, it all crumbled in the face of this simple declaration of independence. "What if we were to recognize your sovereignty?" he asked slowly. "What if we offered to treat humanity as equals in the galactic community?" Morrison's eyes widened slightly. It was the first time in 2 years that she had shown surprise. "Equals? You would treat a single world species as equal to your galactic civilization? Your single world has done something our entire civilization could not," Zektul replied. "You have shown us that there is more than one way to live among the stars. Perhaps it is time we learned from you instead of trying to rule you." The treaty negotiations took 6 months. It was the first time in galactic history that the Council had signed an agreement with an independent species rather than a defeated one. The document was simple and direct, written in language both sides could understand. Humanity would join the galactic community as a free and sovereign species. They would maintain complete control over their own world and their own laws. They would trade and cooperate with Council worlds as equals, not as subjects. And in return, they would share their most dangerous gift: The knowledge that saying no was always an option. The signing ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy. Representatives from hundreds of worlds watched as Secretary General Morrison and Emergency Counselor Prime Zektul signed the first treaty between the Council and a truly free species. But the real change had already begun long before the ceremony. Across Council space, the word that had started it all continued to spread like a virus of liberation. On world after world, tribute payments stopped arriving. Species that had submitted for centuries suddenly remembered what independence felt like. The Korgan of Kepler VII were the first to follow humanity's example, fighting a brief but victorious war for their freedom. The water dwellers of Aquatica Prime negotiated their independence peacefully, threatening to flood their world rather than continue paying tribute. The plant people of the Garden Worlds simply stopped acknowledging council authority, growing thick forests around their cities to keep council representatives out. Within 10 years, the tribute system that had sustained the council for 3 millennia collapsed completely. Nearly 200 worlds declared independence, each one echoing humanity's simple declaration of freedom. The galaxy that emerged from this transformation was chaotic and sometimes dangerous. Without the council's iron control, conflicts broke out between species that had been kept apart for centuries. Trade disputes became trade wars. Old grudges resurfaced. Some worlds struggled to govern themselves after generations of outside control. But it was also a galaxy where choice existed, where species could determine their own destinies, make their own mistakes, and claim their own victories, where the right to say no was recognized as fundamental as the right to breathe. Humanity became known throughout the galaxy not as conquerors or rulers, but as liberators. They were the species that had taught the stars how to be free, the species that had shown the universe that some things were more important than survival, more precious than safety, more valuable than peace. They were the species that had spoken one simple word and changed everything. In the new galactic order, that word was carved into monuments on 100 worlds, translated into 1,000 languages, taught to children as the most important lesson they could learn. No. The word that meant freedom was possible. The word that meant choice existed. The word that meant no being, no matter how small or weak or primitive, ever had to accept slavery just because someone stronger demanded it. Humanity had given the galaxy the most dangerous and wonderful gift imaginable. The knowledge that refusal was always an option, and the stars would never be the same.